So what are we doing? Hang on, Clay. Oh yes, that's what we're doing. We've been talking about the principles of storytelling and screenwriting and how those relate to theology and life. And last week we learned that the basic structure of a story is about a hero who wants something and who overcomes conflict to get it. All stories have this basic structure, and if you don't have that structure, then you don't have a story. So take Jaws, for example. The main protagonist in that story is a sheriff, and the sheriff wants something. What does he want? He wants to kill the shark, and he has to overcome conflict in order to get what he wants. What's the conflict that he has to overcome?
The shark.
He has to overcome the shark, he has to overcome the selfish interests of the people who work on the Chamber of Commerce, he has to deal with danger and death and all that stuff. And that's why the story of Jaws works, because it follows the universal structure of all stories. It's about a hero who wants something and who is willing to overcome conflict in order to get it. And I told you about that structure because I wanted you to be thinking about your life as a story. What do you want? And what do you have to overcome in order to get it? Now, with that in mind, what I want to do for you this morning is teach you one of the most important things that a storyteller or screenwriter has to do in order to tell a good story. And that is inducing you into a willing suspension of disbelief. And this morning I want to suggest to you that not only is the suspension of disbelief essential for the telling of a good story, it is also essential for the living of a good story. Now, before I tell you more about that, I want to ease into it with a sad story from the Bible, and the Bible has plenty of those. Stories like Goodfellas, where the heroes are more bad than good. They're anti-heroes whom you're not meant to like. There's plenty of that in the Bible. Stories like Leaving Las Vegas that end pathetically in tragedy. There's plenty of that in the Bible. Stories like American Beauty that are cautionary tales designed to disturb you. There's plenty of that in the Bible. This biblical tale comes from an obscure text called the Book of Numbers. This is the fourth book of the Jewish Torah. And in chapter 13 it says, "The Lord said to Moses, 'Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I am giving to the Israelites. From each tribe, send one of its leaders.'" So the best way to think about this is that it is a trilogy of films, and this particular sentence is the opening scene in the second movie of that trilogy. In the first movie, things had started out pretty badly. The nation of Israel were living as slaves in Egypt, making pyramids for Ramesses, temples for Anubis, lifting heavy things in the heat of the African sun, nasty stuff. And then, cue Mariah Carey, a hero comes along, Moses. And like all good heroes, in all good stories, he wants something. He wants to free his people from slavery and take them to the land of Canaan, the promised land. But to get what he wants, he has to overcome conflict. And at the end of the movie, he does it. He frees his people from slavery, and the final scene in the first movie is in a place called Kadesh Barnea, where they can see the promised land stretching out before them for the first time. And it's a hopeful ending. It's like the last scene in The Hobbit, where the dwarves see the lonely mountain for the first time and they know that they are close. And now, this sentence is the opening scene in the second movie. And the key word in the sentence, repeated twice for emphasis, is the word send. This is what storytellers call the inciting incident. Something in all good stories happens in the life of the hero towards the beginning that sends their story on a trajectory of adventure. So, for example, Gandalf and the dwarves visit Bilbo in the Shire, and as a result of that incident, he then goes off on an adventure. A virus turns 98% of the world's population into zombies, and because of that incident, Brad Pitt then has his happy life in suburbia disturbed, and he has to go off on this fantastic adventure. In a good story, there is always this inciting incident. And as I said last week, it is our nature to avoid those incidents. We prefer the comfort of the present, however uncomfortable and unsatisfactory it may be, over the uncertainty that lies on the other end of the word send. But sometimes we have no choice. Sometimes life lights a fire under our backside and pushes us forward into places we would not naturally choose to go. Something new, something different. I won't be so crass as to tell you that in every danger there is an opportunity, but that is the nub of it. I'm sending you out to explore the land of Canaan, the promised land. Now, the word explore is perhaps a wee bit misleading, because the idea here is that these men are being sent out to spy, to do some kind of reconnaissance. So, what's the promised land like? Is it well defended? Is it going to be a good place for us to live? How many tanks do they have? What obstacles are we going to have to overcome in order to live there? Are there any orcs? What about sharks? You know, the sort of thing. And I pause on this point because if there is a God, like if all that's true, and if that God really does have a plan for our lives, like if there is such a thing as destiny, that destiny does not absolve us of responsibility, because we must have a role to play in the unfolding of our own story. We have to do our part. It's not the only part, but we do have to do our part. And I mention that because I think that if I said to you that God has a plan for your life and God is working that plan out mysteriously and He's going to bring the story of you to a happier conclusion than you could possibly imagine at present, then you might rightly find that very comforting. But the comfort might be slightly deceptive, because God wants you to do your bit. And doing your bit might involve, indeed often involves, dealing with all the ugly storylines of this filthy, beautiful life. Playing your part in your story has to do with getting through the ugliness and the betrayal and the pain and the tragedy and the suspense. That's all part of it. It's what makes your story work. Anyway, so here we are at the opening scene of The Brink of a Better Life. So this is supposed to be one of those feel-good movies. And then the opening credits roll and we get introduced to some of the main characters. I won't read them, but so here's the movie, and starring a cast of unpronounceables, basically, and in his debut role, Caleb, son of somebody, and Academy Award winner Egal, son of somebody else, and that's how it kind of goes on. Now, when you go and see a movie, you often get a gut feeling, don't you, that although the imagery on the screen before you is pleasant, something unpleasant is about to happen. Like when you see four teenagers driving in a car on a way to a cabin in the woods, you just know that story's not going to end up well. And although at the moment they're laughing and they're joking and it's all it's a good scene and they're off on March break and they're going to have fun like teenagers are meant to have, you just know there's somebody in the woods with a chainsaw and a mask, and it's don't go there. Or when you go and see something from Quentin Tarantino, you intuitively know that all the characters who are there at the beginning of the movie are not going to be there at the end of the movie. and they're going to die imaginative deaths. That's what this is like. This is supposed to be happy. Hey, here we are. on the edge of the promised land. And off we go into a better future. Happy, 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 happy. And the music is upbeat and it's all going well. That's how this is meant to go. But this is the Bible. And in the Bible, you can count on bad stuff happening. And so at the back of your mind, when you see this cast of characters, you get a vibe that this isn't going to go well. Then we get into the specifics of their spying mission. Go up through the Negev and on into the hill country. See what the land is like and whether the people who live there are strong or weak, few or many. What kind of land do they live in? Is it good or bad? What kind of towns do they live in? Are they walled or unwalled? How is the soil? Is it fertile or not so fertile? Do they have trees? Oh, and do your best to bring back some fruit of the land. It was, after all, the season for first ripe grapes. You just know that last sentence was written by some old Italian guy who happened to be there. Right? Hey, you. Yeah, you. Igor, son of whoever. I don't know. I don't care. Bring me back some tomatoes and some grapes. Because next week we're getting together in my cousin's garage and we're making sauce and we're making wine. It's a really strange detail, isn't it? Like, you're being sent out on a secret mission to gather military intelligence. And while you're there, could you grab me some grapes? Can you imagine them saying that to SEAL Team 6? Okay, so your mission is to fly into Abbottabad in Pakistan on top secret stealth helicopters to kill or capture Osama bin Laden. And while you're there, could you pick me up some of them samosas? Because I love those things. They're mental. It's odd, right? So odd it must mean something. Well, here's the deal. In ancient literature, fruit generally, and grapes specifically, are always used as symbols of prosperity. You've heard, I'm sure, of the cornucopia, the horn of plenty. I think we have a... wow, it looks very big from where I'm standing. So this is, I don't know, Zeus or somebody, I suppose. And in his hand, he has the horn of plenty, the cornucopia. And as you can see, there's products coming out of it, fruit and so on and so forth. So, in a world economy dominated by agriculture, fruit is everything. And so when he says to his spies, do your best to bring back some fruit, what he's saying to them is, go there and bring us back some evidence of how amazing our life can be, of how healthy and happy and prosperous we can be in this new place. We've been through hell the past few years. We've been through hard times. We've been through sad times. We've been through suspense and tragedy. But that was in the last movie. In this movie, things are going to get better. So go there and bring us back some grapes, man. Show us how amazing and prosperous our life is about to become. So, they went up and they explored the land from the desert of Zin as far as Rehob. When they reached the valley of Eshcol, these names were written by Tolkien, you can tell, right? It's got that vibe. When they reached this place, they cut off a branch bearing a single cluster of grapes. 2 of them carried it on a pole between them, along with some pomegranates and figs. So, what that's saying is that they were sent to see how good life might be in the promised land, and what they saw was that it might be very good indeed. In a culture that uses fruit as symbolism for health, wealth and prosperity, the fruit was so big that it took 2 people to carry a single cluster of grapes. I'd love to see the watermelons. And then, at the end of 40 days, they returned from exploring the land. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There they reported to them and to the whole assembly and showed them the fruit of the land. And they gave Moses this account. We went into the land to which you sent us, and it does flow with milk and honey, and the grass is green and the girls are pretty. Oh, won't you please take me home? Take me down to the... Right? That's the vibe. Here's the fruit. Here it is. So this is good, right? This is a snapshot of your future. It is everything you hoped it would be. At the moment, we're here in this place called Kadesh, and it's not that great, but just over there is this amazing place, and in that place we are going to be so happy. Now, what's supposed to happen next is one of those pre-action shots that you see in all good movies. Let's have a look at one from Lord of the Rings.
Knuckles for 8!
And Rohan will answer. Muster the Rohirrim. Dunharrow. As many men as can be found. You have 2 days. On the 3rd, we ride for Gondor and war. Emily, make haste to cross the Riddermark. Summon every able-bodied man to Dunharrow.
You ride with us?
Just to the encampment. It's tradition for the women of the court to farewell the men. The men have found their captain. They will follow you into battle, even to death. You have given us hope.
Excuse me. I have a sword. Please accept it. I offer you my service, Theoden King.
And gladly, I accept it. You shall be Meriadoc, Esquire of Rohan.
Horsemen! I wish I could muster a legion of dwarves, fully armed and filthy.
Your kinsmen may have no need to ride to war. I fear war already marches on their own lands.
So, it is before the walls of Minas Tirith the doom of our time will be decided.
Now is the hour! Riders of Rohan! Oaths you have taken! Now fulfill them all! To Lord and land! Now!
So that's how this story's meant to go. We're on the edge of the promised land. It stretches out before us with all its health and its wealth and its happiness. So now, at this point, the inspiring music should go up a bit. And swords should be sharpened, and horses should be saddled, and we should ride bravely like men into a better tomorrow. However, in the next sentence, right after the spies talk about the potential of the promised land, they then go on to talk about the problems of the promised land. Verse 28, the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large. Can I ask you a personal question? I probably don't need to ask it because I could probably tell for myself, but seriously, how big is your butt? I ask the question because perhaps the reason that the movie of your life is not worth watching, and perhaps the reason you don't really want anything and aren't willing to overcome conflict in order to get it, is because your butt is just too large, right? That's the issue in this sentence. The promised land is just over there, and if we lived there, we would have great lives, no question about that. And I know that we should sharpen our swords, and I know that we should saddle our horses and ride bravely like men into a better tomorrow. But the people who live there are just too big. And the walls they stand behind are just too tall and too thick and too strong. Well, duh. Of course they're big and powerful. That's kind of the whole point of the story, isn't it? After all, it wouldn't be much of a story if they were small and weak. I mean, in the movie 300, the story worked really well, I think, because the 300 Spartans stood against 300,000 Persians. That's inspiring. That works. I don't think the movie would have worked quite so well if the 300 Spartans had to stand against the Justin Bieber fan club. It's not quite so moving, is it? There's something about a big story that requires big men and big women. And the bigger the odds, the bigger and better the story. And yet your big butt is holding you back. When you think about the something that you want, you immediately, I suppose, like everyone else, begin to qualify it with a series of reasons why you're never going to get it. And so it starts out in your head as, this thing would be really, really good for me, and it would be fantastic if I could do this, but I'm not clever enough. It starts out as, I would love to pursue this opportunity, and my life would be so amazing if I could pursue this opportunity. But I'm not good at that sort of thing. But it would be far too difficult. Of course it would be difficult. We're talking about the story of your life. And is a little bit of difficulty not a price worth paying for your story to go the way in which you would like it to go in your more dream-filled moments? So anyway, the spies come back with grapes, and they're massive, and everyone's happy, and the grass is green, and the girls are pretty, and you know, and all that, and everyone, you know, there's a real vibe about the place, and everyone's up for it, and everyone's, oh yeah, let's do it. And then they kill the buzz. They're buzz killers. You know, people are big and strong, and it's too difficult, we shouldn't do it, and all that. Then Caleb. So this is Bruce Willis in the story. This is John Wayne in the story. This is Clint Eastwood in the story. This is a big man who's not going to allow his life to be defined by the difficulties of his life. He silences the people and he says, no, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it. And I love this sentence because of the rapid fire use of verbs. We should go, we should take, we should do. Clearly this isn't a man who wants to waste a moment of his life in a feasibility study. This is a man who understands that a better life is there for the taking. Last week when I asked you what your favourite movie was, a few of you said The Shawshank Redemption, and fair enough. Do you remember the famous line from The Shawshank Redemption? Get busy living, or get busy dying. This is brilliant. Get busy living, or get busy dying. One of the values of this church is that we approach opportunity with a just do it mentality. Life is short. Life is fragile. And so while we can, for as much as we can, we should make the most of every good opportunity that comes our way and not live a half life just because things are difficult. But there are always people who surrender to the difficulties. And in the next sentence we read that the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. It's kind of the voice they used. Because they're stronger than we are. So here we have one of those. I think that was quite good. Did you think that was quite good? I could totally do voiceovers. So here we have one of those, I think, quite pathetic moments in a story where the protagonists succumb to the difficulties of their environment, and stories like that simply don't work. I mean, if Bruce Wayne had said, I really hate the fact that there are so many criminals in Gotham City, I really hate it. And I'd like to do something about it, but they're just too tough for me. I wouldn't have gone to see Batman, no way. There's no story there. If in the Magnificent Seven, the 7 gunslingers had said, there's way too many Mexicans for us. Oh, no way am I taking those guys on. No way. I'll just stay at home. I wouldn't have gone to see that movie. Not that I did, because it was in the cinema before my time, of course. But I thought I'd throw in some references that you could relate to. Yes. And in Gone with the Wind... You know, a person who surrenders to the difficulties, a person who is unwilling to face the odds, however overwhelming those odds may be, is a person who simply does not live an interesting story. Then in the next sentence we are told that they spread among the Israelites a bad report about the land they had explored. They said, and this is just funny, the land we explored devours those living in it. How does that work? All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim, these are legendary giants, living there. We were so small, we were like grasshoppers and compared to them. You know, I think that cowardice loves company. People who say that a thing cannot be done need to persuade others that it cannot be done. It makes them feel better about their own lack of resolve and spine. And the sadness of this story is that at the start of it, God had said to the characters in the story, you have this role to play and it's amazing. It's a role of heroism. It's a role of sharpening your sword and saddling your horses and going into the promised land and making a better life for yourself and for your family, and it's going to be so good. And then by the end of the movie, these characters are saying, you've cast the wrong guy. I'm not up for this part. I can't do what you said I can do. This is too big, too much, too hard, too cumbersome. And they do what we do. Do you notice in this sentence how they completely exaggerate the problems that they're facing? We saw giants. Really? You saw giants, okay. And I suppose you saw some trolls as well, did you? Maybe some sea monsters, a couple of sharks with wings. Aliens, you saw them as well. And the land swallows people up, really? Did all that happen? Totally exaggerate their obstacles. Then into the next sentence, next chapter rather, we read that that night all the members of the community, this was supposed to be a happy story, they wept aloud. This movie wasn't meant to end this way. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and they all said to them, if only we had died in Egypt. Do you ever say that to yourself? It would be better to be dead than to face the problems I'm currently going through. And how dumb is that? How dumb is that? Nonetheless, that's how the second movie in the trilogy ends, in sadness. And the sadness is all the more acute because this was not meant to be a sad movie. This was meant to be a movie in which a group of people who wanted something overcame obstacles in order to get it. And I think that sometimes the saddest scenes in the story of our life are the scenes that we never get to see. We all regret, I suppose, some of the things that we have done. But we should equally regret many of the things that we have not done. We feel bad about many of our misadventures. But we should feel equally bad about many of the adventures that we have missed because we were too reticent too afraid. The saddest movie that you'll ever see is the movie of what might have been if only you had the courage to do what you wanted to do. And so I come back, eventually, to the suspension of disbelief. This is a term that describes the deal that exists between the movie maker and the movie goer. Filmmakers understand and rely on the fact, actually, that when you go and see a movie, you're willing to accept a certain level of implausibility in favour of the story, and this acceptance of implausibility is essential. So, for example, you're asked to accept that every barman in the world, from Manchester to Moscow, knows who James Bond is, even though he's supposed to be a secret agent. And you just accept that. You don't waste. You're asked to accept that a simple pair of glasses is sufficient to hide the true identity of Clark Kent. Right? I'm Superman. No, I'm not. Superman. No, I'm not. Totally fooled you. You're asked to accept that when John Rambo has a gun, that gun will rarely run out of ammunition. You're asked to accept that a long time ago in a galaxy far away there was a Wookiee and a couple of robots and a few people who flew around the galaxy fighting a man dressed in black PVC. Right? And in order to enjoy the movie, you accept those things, even though you know that what you're accepting is completely implausible. And if you can't accept the implausibility, you can't enjoy the movie. Have you ever been to a movie with someone who wasn't able to accept implausibility? And they spent the whole movie giving a running commentary on why what you're seeing couldn't possibly happen. Those people are annoying. They are the worst people to see a movie with, like, oh, that couldn't happen, that couldn't happen. Oh, there's no way they could do that. I know! I know there's no such thing as wizards and orcs and fountains of eternal youth and flying sharks, or half shark, half octopus. It's a movie. Shut up. Let me enjoy it. You know, I know 70-year-old men can't break out of prisons and jump out of planes and shoot machine guns. I don't believe there's actual Hunger Games, but you know, that doesn't matter, because I've suspended disbelief for a while in order to enjoy the film. Now I submit to you that not only is a suspension of disbelief essential for telling a good story, it is also essential for living a good life. And I make that suggestion because I know how prone we all are to believe that the obstacles that lie in our way are insurmountable. I know how willing we all are to believe that dreams are for the foolish, and that happiness is for others, that the life we would wish to live is beyond our reach. It is not for the likes of us. So let me make some conclusions and then we'll have questions if there are any. I think it's important to suspend disbelief and say that the baggage and the damage and the wreckage of my life up to this point does not have to affect my life from this point forward. And that requires a suspension of disbelief, because everyone around you is going to say to you, this is who you are. This is your damage, this is your wreckage, this is your baggage, this is who you are forever. And if you're going to move forward and have a better life, you're going to have to suspend all that disbelief and say, no, I don't think so. I'm not going to allow my future to be determined entirely by my past. I think it's important to suspend disbelief and say that the greatest determining factor in the story of your life is not the setting that your story happens in. Does anyone here think that they're in some area of their life in a bad environment? Bad environment at home, bad environment at work, bad in... Special effects. Huh? Don't give that in the Catholic Church, do you? I'm about ready to go. So I'm good now? Yeah, great. What was I saying? Don't get that. I didn't say don't get that in the Catholic Church. You must be mistaken. Mistaken. Ah, yeah, that's right. I said mistaken because I'll make up my own words and you'll like it. I think that we've all seen people who started out in a terrible setting, in a terrible environment, and who ended up living a beautiful story. And I don't think that your setting currently has to determine your story. You don't get to choose all the characters, but you do get to choose your own moves. I think it's important to say that the conflict you face doesn't determine the outcome of your story. You can't control events, of course, and if you think you can, you haven't lived long enough. You don't get to choose your luck, to choose your cancer, to choose the success of the operation that you go through. And yet, I see in this story something that gives me hope. The story of my life is not chiefly determined by the setting that I am in, or by the characters that I have to be around, or by the conflicts that I face. The story as I live is determined by what I choose to believe or not. I've heard that the promised land is good. And I know that there are big men there with big swords standing behind big walls, but screw all that. I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it. How much better would your life be if you suspended disbelief more occasionally and said, you know what, I am beautiful. I am kind. I am smart. I am able. I am talented. I am worthy of love and affection. I can do things. I can make things. I can sell things. I am, as the Bible says, the height of God's creation, worthy of the death of his Son. Would that make your life, in the words of Sean Connery, better or worse? Any questions, as long as the sound holds out? Any questions?
Yeah, what about your contempt with your life?
Contempt? What if you're content with your life? Then do nothing. Okay. No, seriously. If you're content with your life, you are where you're meant to be. The Bible says, does it not, that contentment with godliness is great gain. We don't live in a world that agrees with that. We live in a world that says to us that gain is great gain. Being content with where you are and what you have and so on, and the life you have. Write your book and sell us your story because I want to I want to be you. Contentment with where we are is what we should aim for. We think that we should aim for something that's around the corner, and if we get that and achieve that, then we'll be content. I think that's a lie that we buy into. If you're content with where you are, good for you. Well, I guess that's the other side of that statement. I think, so the other side of the coin, thanks, is that sometimes we do settle for second best, and we find comfort in what is essentially an uncomfortable and an unpleasant situation, but we just say, well, that's perhaps the best that I can do and be, and we persuade ourselves that that's good enough. So we might use the analogy of an old sweater that we really ought to have thrown out years ago. It doesn't fit us anymore. It's worn. It's threadbare, and we really ought to trade it in for for a better product. But we're just comfortable in it, and I think you're right. I think more often than not we are content with things that we ought not to be content with. So that's the other side of the coin, I guess, yes.
why is it that in this particular story, we're hearing the plans of the people to go and basically, I guess, go and kill a whole bunch of other people and take what they have? That seems to, that's about to happen in the story, isn't it?
Yes.
We don't care about the other people?
Oh, no. No. So the Bible's a bit like a... last night I watched The Sons of Iwo Jima. I couldn't sleep, so I watched this... What? Sons of Iwo Jima, you don't have a problem with that? John Wayne? What time is it before I ramble on? 1:30, right? So, yeah, The Sons of Iwo Jima, I don't particularly care about the antagonists. I only care about John Wayne. So, there is this side to the Bible. The Bible is a nasty, is in many ways a nasty story, and there are elements to it that are profoundly ugly, really, really ugly. And we don't take those elements, however, as a prescription of something that we admire, or much less do. The take I have on it is that we get to see how these people journeyed through life with God and what they learned and the mistakes they made, and we get to benefit from their journey. But yeah, hands up, honest, there's nasty stuff in the Bible.
Yeah, it's confusing because it just reinforces what I find is one of the main problems in the world is we're tribal, and as long as we're what our tribe does is fine, and what the other tribe does, who cares?
Yeah. Yes, and it's easier to do nasty things when we demonize our enemies. Yeah. And we all do it, in the Western world and in the non-Western world. Time for one more, no? Sorry, it's dark. Give me a break.
How do you suspend disbelief when the problems that you're having are real, like financial problems, health problems? How do you do that?
Well, we all have real problems, but I think we hold ourselves back in life by believing things about ourselves that aren't necessarily the whole truth. So we, for example, would believe that we're no good with money, and believing that's just a step away from accepting it, and well, there's nothing I can do about it. We can believe that we're not worthy of love and affection. Well, I believe that, so that's just my lot in life. We can believe that we're clumsy, and perhaps we believe that because we have been clumsy and people have told us that we're clumsy. And so we believe this about ourselves, and we believe that our luck is perpetually bad. And we believe things about ourselves that are just simply not true. And I think it's essential in life to just suspend all that belief, however valid it may be. It may be the case that we are bad with money. It may be the case that we are clumsy. It may be the case that we really are hard to be around. But I think it's just essential to say, no, you know what? I can be better. I am worthy of more. I am able to work my way through these situations. I am able to do this and do that. Remember the old adage, whether you think you can or you can't, you're right. Now, you all go, because I'm going to stay here with my son in the back row, because Thor's coming on in half an hour, and we won't have to pay. They're laughing because they think I'm joking. Let me pray for you. Father, will you bless these people? Will you guide them? Will you comfort them? Will you protect them? Will you lead the story of their lives to good and pleasant places? Places of your choosing. Give them peace, I pray. Give them hope. In Christ's name, amen.